I have seen plenty of spoiled, entitled people step through those heavy wooden courtroom doors, but nothing could have adequately prepared me for the morning Chloe Vance decided to grace us with her presence. She did not walk in like a defendant facing serious property damage charges. She floated down the aisle like she was headlining a red carpet event that we were all incredibly lucky to attend. There was a manufactured smugness in the way she moved, a rehearsed, camera-ready certainty in her face that made me tighten my jaw before my bailiff had even called the room to order. And when she finally opened her mouth, the casual disrespect that tumbled out was so thoroughly steeped in modern narcissism that I knew immediately this was not going to be an ordinary hearing. What unfolded over the next hour did not just derail her little social media empire, it proved something I have championed for my entire career on the bench. Inside my courtroom, your follower count does not speak louder than the law. Not your verified checkmark, not your brand deals, not your millions of teenage fans, nothing. The file sitting in front of me looked frustratingly simple at first glance. Chloe Vance, 21 years old, accused of reckless endangerment, vandalism, and creating a public disturbance. According to the police report, she and her camera crew had staged a viral prank inside a local, family-owned floral shop. In the name of internet fame, Chloe had intentionally knocked over 3 massive tiered displays of expensive orchids, shattering dozens of imported ceramic pots, and ruining thousands of dollars in delicate merchandise. When the 6-8-year-old owner of that shop tried to stop her, terrified and confused by the chaos, Chloe had laughed, shoved a smartphone in his face, called his life's work aesthetic garbage, and ran out to her waiting G-Wagon. Store security cameras, along with her own proudly uploaded footage, had captured the entire shameful incident. The case should have been a straightforward matter of restitution and a stern legal lesson, but the part that made it entirely different was how Chloe perceived reality. She had 15 million followers online, a lifestyle funded by constant attention, and she had clearly grown up believing that the actual world was nothing more than a disposable backdrop for her content. That delusion apparently extended to my courtroom. She did not arrive alone, of course. People like Chloe never do. She was flanked by an exhausted-looking attorney and a young man holding a professional-grade camera, walking backward to capture her grand entrance. My bailiff stepped in front of the cameraman before I even had to raise my voice. I watched from the bench as the realization hit her that this room was not her personal studio. She rolled her eyes, let out an exasperated sigh, and waved the cameraman out the double doors as if dismissing a servant. When she finally approached the defense table, the sound of her chunky designer boots echoed loudly. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, a designer crop top, and baggy track pants, completely and utterly inappropriate for a court of law. This was not someone ready to answer for her actions. This was someone annoyed by an interruption to her schedule. "Miss Vance," I said, letting the silence hang in the air for a full 10 seconds before I addressed her. "Are you under the impression that you are currently at a pool party?" She slowly pulled the sunglasses down the bridge of her nose. "It's my aesthetic, Your Honor. My followers expect a certain look." She said it with absolute seriousness, as if her internet aesthetic was a recognized legal defense. Her attorney, a man who looked like he had aged 5 years in the short walk from the door to the table, immediately stepped forward. "Your Honor, we sincerely apologize. It has been a very chaotic morning." "I am not speaking to you, counselor," I said sharply, my eyes locked on the young woman who was already tapping the screen of her smartphone underneath the table. "Miss Vance, put the phone away. If I see it again, my bailiff will confiscate it, and you will not get it back until I am good and ready. You are in a court of law, not a coffee shop." She scoffed, an actual audible scoff. She dropped the phone into a bag that likely cost more than the monthly rent of the man she had victimized. Sitting in the third row of the gallery was Mr. Arthur Henderson. He was a quiet, dignified man who had spent 40 years building his floral business from the ground up. He wore a neat, pressed suit that was perhaps a decade old, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He looked tired. He looked like a man who could not understand why someone would destroy his livelihood for a few seconds of internet attention. And right in front of him sat the girl who had done it, behaving like the legal system was nothing more than a minor inconvenience to her day. "Let us review exactly why you are taking up my time this morning," I said, opening the thick manila folder on my bench. "Reckless endangerment, criminal mischief, and willful destruction of private property. According to the sworn affidavits, you entered Henderson's Floral Boutique at approximately 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. You did not intend to purchase anything. You intended to use another human being's livelihood as a disposable prop for your prank channel. Her lawyer, Mr. Sterling, stood up immediately, adjusting his silk tie with a practiced defensive motion. Your Honor, my client is an entertainer. The incident in question was a comedic sketch that simply got a little out of hand. Miss Vance never intended malicious harm. We are fully prepared to compensate Mr. Henderson for the broken ceramics and be on our way. Sit down, counselor, I snapped, my voice cutting through the room like a whip. I did not ask for a press release. I asked for accountability. I turned my gaze back to Chloe, who was currently inspecting her manicured nails with profound disinterest. Miss Vance, your attorney calls this a comedic sketch. Do you find the destruction of a senior citizen's business funny? She let out a short, breathy laugh, shifting her weight onto one hip. I mean, it's just flowers, Your Honor. People liked the video. It got like 4 million views in under an hour. My management team said it was great for engagement. A heavy, stifling silence fell over the courtroom. In the third row of the gallery, Arthur Henderson closed his eyes. This was not just flowers to him. Those orchids were rare, carefully cultivated hybrids he had imported and nurtured for months to keep his small business afloat during a tough economic quarter. To him, they represented survival, pride, and 40 years of honest sweat. To Chloe Vance, they were just fragile things meant to be smashed for a 10-second dopamine hit from strangers on the internet. Great for engagement, I repeated slowly, letting the sheer, toxic absurdity of the phrase echo against the wood-paneled walls. So, in your mind, the popularity of your vandalism somehow erases the criminality of it? She shrugged, giving me a look of pure, unfiltered entitlement. If he wants, I can tag his shop in the caption. That's worth way more than some broken pots. He'd probably get a ton of business out of it. I leaned forward, folding my hands together tightly on top of the case file. Counselor, I said, my voice dropping to that quiet, dangerous register that seasoned attorneys know to fear. Your client is facing charges of criminal vandalism and reckless endangerment, and her defense is that she offered to tag the victim on a social media app. Are you advising her that this is a valid legal strategy in the state of California? Mr. Sterling cleared his throat nervously, his face flushing a deep, uncomfortable red. He looked like a man who desperately wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. No, Your Honor, my client is simply trying to explain the context of the context, I interrupted, cutting him off completely, is that she destroyed a hard-working man's property for sport. I turned my attention to the court clerk. Let's watch this highly engaging content, shall we? The courtroom monitors flickered to life, displaying the video Chloe had so proudly uploaded to her millions of followers. It started with her standing outside Henderson's floral boutique, whispering excitedly to the camera about executing a clumsy girl aesthetic prank. The footage then cut to the inside of the quiet, peaceful shop. Arthur Henderson was visible in the background, carefully misting a row of delicate ferns. Then, Chloe walked into the frame. She purposefully hooked the strap of her heavy designer bag onto the corner of a massive, tiered wooden display holding dozens of imported orchids. With a theatrical, exaggerated gasp, she yanked the bag forward, bringing the entire structure crashing down. The sound of shattering ceramic, snapping stems, and splashing water was loud enough to make several people in the gallery physically wince. The video showed Mr. Henderson rushing over, his face pale with absolute shock, his hands trembling as he looked down at the ruin of his most expensive, carefully cultivated inventory. Chloe did not apologize. She did not help him pick anything up. Instead, the camera zoomed in closely on her face as she let out a loud, obnoxious laugh. Oops. Guess your aesthetic is ruined anyway, Grandpa, she giggled, before turning on her heel and jogging out the door, her cameraman trailing right behind her. When the video ended, the silence in the courtroom was absolute and heavy. I turned my gaze back to Chloe. She was examining a split end on her thumbnail. No shame, no horror, no realization of the cruelty she had just inflicted. Just profound, arrogant boredom. Miss Vance, I said, my voice slicing through the quiet room, do you remember what you said to Mr. Henderson as he stood over the shattered pieces of his livelihood? I was playing a character, she said defensively, finally looking up, annoyed that she was being forced to explain her art. It's a persona. You have to be exaggerated for the algorithm. It's what my fans want. The algorithm, I repeated, letting the absurd word hang in the air like a bad smell. So, the algorithm told you to call an elderly man Grandpa and laugh directly in his face while you destroyed his property? I mean, yeah, kind of, Chloe answered, her tone suggesting that I was the one being unreasonable. Look, My team brought a checkbook today. We can literally write him a check right now for whatever the plants cost, plus like an extra 1,000 for his trouble. It's a win-win. He gets paid, and I get content. That's how this works." A low, collective murmur rippled through the gallery. Even her own attorney buried his face in his hands, realizing the hole his client was digging was rapidly becoming a grave. "A win-win," I echoed, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm register. I stood up from my chair. Whenever I stand up in the middle of a hearing, the people who have been in my courtroom before know that the grace period is officially over. Let me explain to you how the real world works, Miss Vance. You do not get to walk into another person's place of business, destroy the things they have built with their own two hands, traumatize them, and then throw a check at them like they are a peasant performing for your amusement. For the first time since she strutted into the room, Chloe's smirk faltered. She blinked, visibly taken aback by the volume and absolute authority in the room. "But I'm paying him back," she argued, though her voice had finally lost some of its lazy, rehearsed drawl. "You are missing the fundamental point of human decency," I fired back, leaning over the bench. "You did not ask for his permission. You did not warn him. You invaded his sanctuary and treated him like a disposable prop. You treated a human being like a joke because you think your internet fame makes you untouchable. It does not." I reached for a thick blue folder near the edge of my bench. "Before I decide exactly how to handle your profound lack of respect, we are going to hear from the man you decided to use for your content." Mr. Henderson submitted a victim impact statement. "And unlike your prank, Miss Vance, this is not a joke. You will sit there, you will be quiet, and you will listen." I opened the thick blue folder and adjusted my glasses, waiting until the courtroom was so dead silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "This statement was written by Mr. Comte Arthur Henderson," I began, my voice steady and carrying a weight that demanded absolute attention. "For 40 years, Henderson's Floral Boutique has been my life. My late wife and I opened it in 1986. We built the display shelves together. The orchids that were destroyed on Tuesday were a rare Phalaenopsis hybrid. They require strict temperature control, precise watering, and 6 months of careful attention before they even begin to bloom. They were the centerpiece of my spring inventory, the financial safety net that was going to pay my shop's lease for the next 3 months." I paused, lowering the paper just enough to look over the top of my glasses at Chloe. She had finally stopped picking at her cuticles. Her hands were now resting stiffly in her lap. I continued reading. "But the loss of money is not what keeps me awake at night. What haunts me is the sound of the crash and the cruel laughter that followed. When they burst in, I did not understand what was happening. I thought I was being robbed. I was terrified. And when I looked up, trying to salvage the broken pieces of my plants, there was a camera shoved into my face. That young woman did not see a frightened old man. She saw a prop. Over the last 3 days, my family has shown me the comments on her video. Millions of people, total strangers, laughing at my panic, laughing at my ruined store. I have never felt more humiliated in the very place I spent my entire life building." I closed the folder and let it drop onto the wooden desk with a sharp, heavy thud. The sound echoed like a gunshot, making Chloe physically flinch. "A prop," I repeated, letting the word sink its teeth into the room. "That is what a human being's life amounts to in your world, Miss Vance. A background character for your digital circus." I didn't know about his wife," Chloe stammered, her voice suddenly small, stripped entirely of its vocal fry and arrogant cadence. "I didn't know it meant that much." "Of course you didn't know," I snapped, my voice rising, "because knowing would require you to look up from your own reflection long enough to see the actual world happening around you. You did not stay to ask. You did not stay to help. You broke an honest man's heart, filmed his humiliation, and monetized his pain." Chloe's attorney jumped up, sensing the absolute disaster his client was facing. "Your Honor, please. Miss Vance is a young woman who got caught up in the severe pressures of internet fame. She is profoundly sorry, and we are willing to double the restitution to Mr. Henderson immediately." "Sit down, counselor, before I hold you in contempt," I warned, not breaking my stare with the defendant. "Miss Vance, your attorney seems to think that doubling a check suddenly injects a conscience into an empty chest. Is that what you think? Do you believe you can just cut a larger check to buy back the human dignity you stole from a 68-year-old man?" "No," she whispered. The camera-ready confidence was entirely gone, replaced by the trembling reality of a girl who was finally facing a wall her millions of followers could not tear down for her. She looked around the quiet courtroom, realizing that no one was filming, No one was cheering, and there was no comment section to validate her terrible behavior. Good, because you cannot, I said, opening the sentencing guidelines on my desk. Chloe Vance, you are guilty of criminal mischief and reckless endangerment because you showed absolute premeditation, zero immediate remorse, and caused significant financial and emotional distress to a vulnerable business owner. I am going to give you a sentence your management team cannot negotiate away. The color completely drained from her face. Please, she choked out, her hands gripping the edge of the wooden table. You will serve 30 days in the county jail, effective immediately. A sharp, panicked gasp escaped her lips. Jail? You can't do that. But I have brand deals. I have a major product launch next week. Your launch is officially delayed, I replied coldly, my voice steady over her rising panic. Furthermore, you will complete 300 hours of community service. And let me make this exceptionally clear. If I find out a single camera, smartphone, or ring light was present during those 300 hours, I will double your jail time. You will scrub floors and serve the public in absolute, unrecorded anonymity. Take her into custody, I ordered. The gavel came down with a sharp, definitive crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. The bailiff stepped forward, and for the first time in her highly documented, meticulously curated life, Chloe Vance had no script, no ring light, and no audience to manipulate. As they led her away, the heavy courtroom doors swung shut behind her. The sharp click of her designer boots faded down the hallway, taking her manufactured internet persona with it. Her attorney scrambled to pack his expensive leather briefcase, entirely unable to meet my eyes, while the young cameraman, who had been waiting outside, peered through the door's glass panel, looking completely lost without his star. I turned my attention back to Mr. Henderson. He had remained seated in the third row, his worn hands still folded in his lap, but the heavy, exhausting tension had finally left his shoulders. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice softening to a respectful register, the court will ensure you receive every single cent owed to you by the end of the week. You will be able to rebuild your shop, and it will be better than before. No one has the right to treat your life's work as a punchline. He stood up slowly, tears shining in his tired, weathered eyes, and gave me a deep, dignified nod. Thank you, Your Honor, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I just wanted her to know that my life mattered. The gallery erupted into spontaneous applause. I didn't reach for my gavel to silence them right away. Sometimes, ordinary, hard-working people need to see that the system still works. They need to witness, in real time, that the law still protects them against the arrogant, the wealthy, and the entitled. Over the next month, my clerk kept me updated. Chloe Vance served her full 30 days. Her management team desperately tried to file an emergency appeal, citing her mental health and catastrophic brand damage, but it was swiftly and firmly denied. When she was released, she immediately began her 300 hours of community service. There were no apology videos with fake tears. There were no carefully curated comeback posts. She swept floors at a local community center, served food at a public kitchen, and she did it all in complete, unrecorded anonymity. Perhaps the most satisfying update came 6 months later. Henderson's floral boutique didn't just recover. The local community had rallied behind him after hearing what happened, bringing in more honest business than he had seen in a decade. As for Chloe, she eventually returned online, but the content had fundamentally changed. The smugness was gone. The toxic, destructive pranks were deleted entirely. She posted a single, quiet video explaining that she had learned a hard, incredibly necessary lesson about respect. That is exactly why I wear this robe. We live in an era where people believe a screen can shield them from reality, where millions of followers can somehow replace basic human decency and empathy. But the law does not care about your algorithm. It does not care about your engagement metrics, your brand deals, or your aesthetic. True character is not something you can broadcast for likes. It is what you do when the cameras are finally turned off. And sometimes, the absolute only way to teach that lesson is to force the entitled to step out of their digital illusion and face the unwavering, heavy reality of accountability.